Generation of video synthesizer stuff at the TV Center. Ralph and I were talking about, he wanted to close the TV Center and have studios in everybody's house, rather than them all coming to the TV Center to use one studio. And one thought that he had at that point was to take all of the important equipment, the unique equipment at the TV Center, and put it all in a suitcase. And then send that suitcase around to each person's own home studio. So they'd have their own recorders and cameras, and you'd just ship the suitcase around to them, and it would go from one person to the next, and rather than them come to the TV Center. So it'd be E.T.C in a suitcase. Wasn't exactly practical. At that point, the colorizer was the size of a suitcase. The frame buffer was the size of a suitcase. So we were talking more like having a truck that would have to ship around instead of ETC in a suitcase. And so, it was an idea. It was something fun to think about while we were sipping scotch. But fast forward to around 2007, and I realized that electronics had moved to the point where things were miniaturized, all these tiny little laptops and phones and miniature cameras, that with surface mount components, you could finally make these old machines small enough that you could actually physically make ETC in a suitcase. So I started developing a series of modules that were based on the old video synthesizer devices that I had made in the 70s and 80s. And rather than build them each in a separate box, I looked around at the audio synthesizers that had had this remarkable revival in the 90s and early 2000s. And there were a number of different formats out there, and I picked this one format that seemed to be one of the smaller formats, but wildly popular and growing in popularity, called Eurorack. And that's what this case is. And then over the last 6 or 7 years, I've developed a series of modules that are based on my old designs, but heavily improved, much higher image quality, much smaller size. And also expanding on some of the concepts of the early days so that there's more features and more possibilities in combining the signals and combining the modules. What's here is a very small subset of what I've been developing. There's only a couple of modules out of the system here. I have about a dozen more at home, and I have a total of about 20 that I've been developing. I'm hoping this summer to start releasing some of these commercially, and people can actually start having their own little ETC in a suitcase at home, hopefully later this year. One of the advantages of using an audio synthesizer is, in the old days, besides building the video equipment, we also ended up building our own little audio synthesizers as devices to create control voltages to then manipulate the video modules. Using an audio synthesizer as the base for this, that already exists as a whole series of modules to create control voltages to manipulate the video. So now with Eurorack, there's over 1,000 audio modules available commercially for audio synthesis. So there's this massive amount of modules available for creating control voltages to then control the video modules. What I've got here is this black module is a module I've been actually selling for a couple of years now, called the MVIP, and it's a digital module. It takes video in, and it digitally simulates several of the devices that I was building back in the old days. It's what's creating the colors. Let me just turn these down here.